Αγαπητοί τηλεθεατές, καλησπέρα σας. Η εκπομπή Ομογένεια Εδω Λονδινο θα σας παρουσιάσει και σήμερα τις εκδηλώσεις που πραγματοποιήθηκαν στην Ομογένεια του Λονδίνου και αφορούν στον ελληνισμό της Μεγάλης Βρετανίας. Πριν ξεκινήσουμε σήμερα το πρόγραμμά μας, θα θέλαμε να ενημερώσουμε τους τηλεθεατές μας από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο ότι μπορείτε πλέον να παρακολουθείτε το πρόγραμμά μας αλλά και τις υπόλοιπες παραγωγές του Hellenic TV από το Freeview στο κανάλι 244. Το μόνο που χρειάζεται είναι μια smart τηλεόραση και σύνδεση στο ίντερνετ. Επίσης, μπορείτε να προμηθευτείτε το Roku Box από τα γραφεία της ήταν UK στο Southgate, όπου μπορείτε να παρακολουθείτε δεκάδες τηλεοπτικά και ραδιοφωνικά ελληνικά κανάλια από Ελλάδα και Κύπρο. Για περισσότερες πληροφορίες, επικοινωνήστε με την ήταν UK ή επισκεφτείτε την ιστοσελίδα της www.sitanuk.com. Το Hellenic TV πρωτοπορεί και δημιουργεί το application Vision TV Net για τις smartphone και Android συσκευές σας. Έτσι, με το Vision TV Net μπορείτε να παρακολουθείτε όλα τα προγράμματά μας ζωντανά στο κινητό, στο tablet ή στον υπολογιστή σας. Για περισσότερες πληροφορίες σχετικά με τα προγράμματα του Hellenic TV μπορείτε να βρείτε στην ιστοσελίδα μας www.hellenictv.net. Επίσης, για την προβολή της εκδήλωσης ή της επιχείρησής σας, επικοινωνήστε μαζί μας στο τηλέφωνο 020 82 92 70 37 ή στην ηλεκτρονική μας διεύθυνση info@hellenictv.net. Στο απόψινό μας πρόγραμμα θα παρακολουθήσετε τη συγκέντρωση που διοργάνωσε η Εθνική Κυπριακή Ομοσπονδία και το Ευρωπαϊκό Κίνημα για το μεγάλο δημοψήφισμα της 23ης Ιουνίου σχετικά με την παραμονή ή την έξοδο της Βρετανίας από την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Επίσης θα δείτε αποσπάσματα από την μεγάλη συναυλία που διοργάνωσε η μουσική σχολή BK Music School και τέλος ένα μικρό απόσπασμα από την συνέντευξη που έδωσε στο σταθμό μας και στο Βασίλη Παναγή η γνωστή στην παροικία Anne Conley. Ας περάσουμε στο πρώτο μας θέμα που παρουσιάζει την συγκέντρωση που διοργάνωσε η Εθνική Κυπριακή Ομοσπονδία την περασμένη Τρίτη, 14 Ιουνίου, στο Οίκημα της Αδελφότητας στο Finchley. Η συγκέντρωση σχετίζεται με το δημοψήφισμα της 23ης Ιουνίου σχετικά με το δημοψήφισμα για την παραμονή της Βρετανίας στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Κύρια ομιλήτρια στη συγκέντρωση ήταν η Υπουργός Παιδείας της Βρετανικής Κυβέρνησης Nicky Morgan Μ.P, Secretary of State of Education. Επίσης έδωσαν το παρόν και μίλησαν οι βουλευτές Hon Norman Lamp, η Catherine West M.P, ο Mike Freer και ο Sir Alan Miel. Συντονιστής της συγκέντρωσης ήταν ο Πρόεδρος της Εθνικής Κυπριακής Ομοσπονδίας, Χρίστος Καραολής. Ας δούμε όλες τις ομιλίες στο βίντεο που ακολουθεί.
On behalf of the National Federation of Cypriots in the UK and the European movement, I would like to welcome you all to this evening's event. Tonight, the UK Cypriot community and politicians from across the political spectrum have come together with one voice to say unequivocally that our country, the United Kingdom, is better off inside the European Union than outside it. As UK Cypriots, first and foremost, we look to the best interests of the UK, and we believe that the UK's place is at the heart of the European Union. It is in the best interest of our country, Europe, and indeed Cyprus. Our membership of the European Union over the last 43 years has strengthened the UK's security, boosted prosperity with jobs, trade, and investment, and enshrined protections for workers and women. So why would we turn our back on this?
Hi, I'll just finish off where Christos started. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Norman Lamp, MP for North Norfolk, former Health and Social Care Minister.
Great to see you all, and I'm sorry that you got me first. I'm the sort of warm-up act, as it happens, but I'm conscious that I have to be in central London at 7:30, and if Nicky went first, I'd end up having to leave before I'd even started. So I feel I owe you the respect of giving you a proper amount of time in talking to you. So I hope you don't mind having me first. I should just also mention, I should incidentally say how good it was to meet Your Excellency this evening and to talk to you. When I finished at university way back in 1980, I went to live just off Hermitage Road, off Green Lanes in Tottenham. And I found myself in the middle of a Cypriot community. And I just had the most wonderful, friendly neighbours. So I have enormously fond and happy memories of that time. And I was welcomed to London by Cypriots living in that part of our great city. So thank you to your community. And I also just wanted to make the point that this country and Cyprus remain very close allies, and we must maintain that. Indeed, we must maintain it whatever happens a week on Thursday. And from my party's point of view, the Liberal Democrats, we support every effort that can be made to resolve the dispute within Cyprus, which still continues to trouble the peoples of the island. And I think it is incredibly important that international efforts are made to support the Cypriots in finding a resolution to this very long-standing standoff. So you have our support in seeking to achieve that. I wanted also, before I explain to you why... Oh, hello, Nicky. Very good to see you. Good to see you. So, as I was saying, before I explain to you why I am absolutely clear in my position on the decision that we all take a week on Thursday, I wanted to explain that I'm not actually a starry-eyed enthusiast for the European Union. I think the European Union has made some significant mistakes over the years, and I share the frustrations of many people at what sometimes feels like an over-centralisation of power. But when it comes to the crunch, and when I have to make my decision about which way to vote, I am absolutely clear that we should vote to remain in the European Union. And I wanted to just mention 3 reasons in my contribution this evening. First of all, immigration, which has in many ways dominated the debate. And my frustration, in a way, is that the debate through this campaign has focused entirely on what people see as the negative aspects of immigration. But we should also celebrate what people who come to this country offer to our communities in this country. We should celebrate the diversity, celebrate the massive contributions that people from other countries, including from Cyprus, make to the richness of our community in the arts, in business, and indeed in politics. And we should also remember the economic impact of all the people who come to our country, and the impact of people who work in our public services. We had a lodger for a couple of years at our home in Norwich. She happened to be from Poland. She works with people with learning disabilities, a very tough and challenging job, a job that sometimes people in this country don't want to do. I have great admiration for the work that she did and still does in our country. She has made Norwich her home. She contributes to our society by working with people with learning disability, and we should celebrate and appreciate that, not always denigrate people who come and live and work in our country. And when I visited recently the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital, my local hospital, I was told that there are 330 people in that one hospital from around Europe working in our National Health Service. And so many people working in care for disabled people, care for elderly people, giving of themselves, often in very challenging circumstances. And these are people who've chosen to come to our country. So let's just ensure that we have a balanced debate about immigration. And if this country chooses to vote to leave the European Union, any claim that this in some way solves the immigration problem is outrageous and untrue, because there will still be just the same needs in our economy. There will still be the jobs to be done in health and care and in other parts of our economy. We will still have to address those difficult issues, but it in many ways will be more difficult to address them if we choose to leave the European Union. And it's a difficult argument, but it's an honest argument that has to, in my view, be made. The second, but related argument, is the economy. Now, people have been very frustrated, I suspect, during the course of this campaign as one side and the other trade claims and counterclaims. And for very many people, they are left completely confused about what the real position is. And I don't want to make any assertion about pounds, shillings and pence that families will be better or worse off. But what I do know is that there is an absolute wealth of economic opinion, nationally and internationally, which is very clear about the significant risks that this country faces. The IMF, the G20 finance ministers, the OECD, the Governor of the Bank of England, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, an independent research institute. This is not a conspiracy to try and do our country down. These are people who are our allies, our friends in this country and abroad. They are giving a sober view about the dangers to our economy. And if our economy takes a downturn as a result of leaving the European Union, there is one result of that. It means reduced tax revenues. It makes it more difficult to fund the NHS, more difficult to fund pensions, to fund schools, the police, defence, and so forth. So there are very real dangers. And if we were to leave this single market of 500 million consumers, the biggest single market anywhere in the world, big international companies that are deciding where to locate their manufacturing facilities to hit that enormous single market, would not choose a country on the outside of the single market. They will decide instead to locate their premises in another country inside the European single market. So we will lose jobs and inward investment, and that will also lead to a downturn in our economy. This is a big risk, and if anyone is in any doubt and doesn't believe the claims and the counterclaims, just look at this evening's Evening Standard. Brexit shares meltdown, £20 billion, wiped off FTSE as investors fear leave vote. This is real. It's money disappearing from the economy. We need to take it seriously. But then finally, my argument in a sense, and the thing that makes me most clear in my mind about the need to stay in the European Union, is one about the future of our continent. We live, I think, in very dangerous times. We face significant threats internationally. We face a threat from an expansionist Kremlin and Vladimir Putin. We face the threat of radical jihadists coming from the Middle East. These vast flows of migrants, which we are starting to see fleeing from conflict, particularly in the Middle East. The threat of climate change. These are big, big challenges. And do we really think we are going to be better able to confront these challenges on our own or working together with other European countries? And think about the people internationally who are in favour of us leaving the European Union. First, Donald Trump. Are you on Donald Trump's side? Secondly, the far-right leader of the Front National in France, Marine Le Pen, supports us leaving the European Union. And I'll come back in a moment to the reason why. And, of course, Vladimir Putin. Both Vladimir Putin and Marine Le Pen, incidentally, the far-right National Front in France, funded in part by the Russians. What do they want to see? They want to see the fragmentation of our continent. They want to see the Western alliance fractured, broken up, weakened, because they benefit from that. The far right across Europe, on the rise, will benefit from the fragmentation of our continent. Narrow nationalism on the far right, dangerous. And remember the history of this continent. 2 world wars founded in this continent. And anyone who believes that's simply in the past should think again. We should always remember just how fragile our civilization is, how quickly things can go out of control. We, as a country, should not only be thinking about our national interests, but thinking about our responsibility as the 5th biggest economy in the world, the biggest defence nation in the European Union. We have a responsibility internationally to maintain the Western Alliance, to maintain peace and security. And you know, Matthew Parris, the Conservative, wrote recently in the Times an article which I thought summed it up extraordinarily well. He said at the end of his article, making the case for Remain, there are not enough people in this world trying to get on with each other. Let's stick with those people who are. Thank you very much indeed.
Norman, thank you very much for your contribution, and apologies, I didn't formally introduce you.
No, that's fine.
The next speaker this evening is the Education Secretary, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank her for intervening directly with Pearson to safeguard the future of the Greek A-level here in the UK. The continuation of the Greek A-level is not just important for our community, but also serves as a timely reminder of our common link and heritage between the UK and the wider European family of nations. Without further ado, Nicky Morgan.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I know that Norman has to go, so I have to say what's extraordinary about this EU referendum campaign is some of the unlikely friendships and platforms that we're all sharing together. But it's very nice to be sharing a platform with Norman. It's very nice to be sharing a platform with Catherine as well. Because this is a really momentous decision that we are facing with 8 days to go. And 9 days to go. I'm wishing my days away now. I'm just trying to think of the 9 days to go. We have a momentous decision that is going to affect the future of Britain for decades to come. And I don't want to echo everything that Norman has said. I think that you've probably all heard lots of arguments. You'll continue to hear lots more from our speakers later on this evening. But let me just tell you why I made up my mind to vote for the Remain campaign. And I think it's really essential that everyone in this room who's able to do so, has a vote next Thursday, absolutely goes out there and exercises that vote. Do not allow anybody else to have their say about the future of this country on your behalf. And I particularly appeal to the younger voters in this room and to the female voters in this room as well. It's too easy to wake up on the morning after a momentous vote and think, well, I wonder if I should have had my say. I should have found my way to the polling station. It was a busy day. I had lots going on. This is not one of those votes that you can sit out. But when I thought about it last autumn, and then again in February when the Prime Minister returned from Brussels with the renegotiated settlement with the European Union, for me it was actually a very straightforward choice. Firstly, yes, of course, Norman has mentioned the economic shock. He's mentioned the fact that we can now see billions of pounds being wiped off the shares of companies in this country. And that's not some sort of esoteric argument where it's happening in the City of London. It doesn't mean anything to people here in North London, people in my Leicestershire constituency, for example. That has a direct impact on the amount of money that we have to spend on the sorts of services that make this country great. The investments, the prices that we all pay for goods, the jobs that are created. You know, we've been through a tough recession. I'm sure all of you are not immune from the difficulties started in 2008. But we have come back from that. We have created 2 million new jobs in this country. We see people being employed. And as Education Secretary, I don't want to be educating young people, helping them to take Greek exams, and then find that when they leave school and college, there are not the jobs available for them to go to. That wouldn't be fair on our young people. And so it's very important we think about the next generation when we vote as well. The second reason why I think that we should vote to stay is one that Norman talked about a bit, about security, about the sharing of information, about the cooperation, the benefits that we get by working with our EU partners. He's absolutely right to say that we live in a dangerous and complex world, and we've seen that only just this week with the dreadful events in Orlando and now the terrible attack yesterday in Paris on the police chief and his wife. But we need, therefore, to share intelligence with our EU partners. No, it's by working together with our EU partners that we managed to smash, working with them, the largest online child pornographic ring in the world. We managed to negotiate the EU climate change deal. My colleague Amber Rudd said in the debate last week that at the climate change talks in Paris last year, there were 3 blocks. There was China, there was the US, and there was the EU. It's by working with the EU that we impose sanctions on Russia. It's by working with the EU that we're able to trade information about things like human trafficking, FGM, forced marriage, those sorts of issues that frankly blight our world and need to be tackled. So yes, we need to work together and we benefit from the sharing of information. And for those who say on the other side, oh, well, it'll carry on. Don't worry, it'll all be the same. You won't really notice any difference. Well, I say that can't be right, because if you vote to leave, you are turning your backs on European nations, and they're not going to welcome us back. They're not going to say, yes, of course, have access to the single market, but don't worry about complying with the rules. Of course, we'll share our intelligence with you, but don't worry about complying with the rules or sharing the information with us. And that's my third reason. I love this country. I grew up in this country. I think that Britain is an outward-facing nation. I think we are at our best, and I suspect the reason that many of you enjoy living here, that you've either come here, you've brought your families up here, is because of the benefits of living here in Britain, because we are an outward-facing nation. We play our part in the world. We work with others to tackle these great problems that we face. We are an island nation in terms of our physical geography, but we are not an island nation in the part that we play in the world. Norman mentioned we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We have one of the largest defence forces still in the world. And of course, I want young people who grow up and be educated here to take advantage of being a part of the EU. We're part of something called the Erasmus scheme. 200,000 UK students go and travel abroad and immerse themselves in other people's cultures, other people's way of life. That has to be a good thing for our young people. And of course, we have, just in my own area, a number of teachers who will come here and be based in our schools, benefiting our young people. So no, I don't think we should turn our backs on the world. If we think it's worth being part of the UN, part of NATO, part of the International Monetary Federation, then I think it's worth being part of the EU on a continuing basis. So this is a huge vote next week. Forget party politics, that's why we're all different politicians from different parties on the same platform. This is about, as I say, the future of Britain for decades to come. It's about the statement that we make about our place in the world, the role that we want to play as a country. So thank you for your interest. Thank you for being here. I hope very much that all those in this room who are able to will vote Remain on the 23rd of June. Thank you.
Our next speaker this evening is a very good friend of Cyprus, Catherine West, who is trustee of the... Oh, welcome, Sir Alan. Another guest speaker who needs no introduction. So Catherine West will be speaking next. She is the APPG. She's the trustee of the APPG for Cyprus and a shadow foreign minister, and has been a great friend of Cyprus's before and since her election to Parliament. Catherine.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Kalispera. It's lovely to be here, and as ever, with so many wonderful friends. It just feels like yesterday that we sat down to the most terrific meal for St. Barnabas Day, which of course is the Saints' Day of Cyprus. And what a lucky Member of Parliament I am to have the two wonderful congregations in Wood Green every Friday, Good Friday, before, of course, Greek Easter, not the other Easter. And we have the most wonderful procession led by the small children with their petals. They give everybody beautiful spring petals as they come up, and they're blessed by the Archbishop. It's such a wonderful Wood Green tradition, and it's just such a pleasure to have that as my second Easter, usually. And I'm just consider myself to be very lucky. But it's not just as the Member of Parliament, because previously when I represented the Tollington ward in Islington, when I was Islington Borough Leader, I also had Sussex Ward and Tollington Way, and of course many of you will have been down to the Greek church in Sussex Way, and Arachne, Women's Centre there, where often the Archbishop would come, bless us all, and we'd have a lovely afternoon together. And that's the kind of ritual and the kind of thing which we've all come to treasure. And this is really what North London is all about, our annual rituals, whether it is the Arachne Women's, or it might be going to Pesach with the Jewish community, which is where Nicky's gone off to the Jewish Chronicle, or whether it's Nevroz, or whether it's another festival. It's so important because in London we believe in human rights and we acknowledge everybody and we're respectful to each other, and they are European values. Now, in my role as the Shadow Minister for the Asia-Pacific region, I went to China for a 2-day summit, and it was led by colleagues from Eastern Europe, actually, because they were leading the delegation about infrastructure investment. And it was a good event. There were 11 speakers, 10 men and 1 woman, that was me. And I thought this is a very interesting event because it wasn't until I was able to speak that we mentioned human rights in China, the fact that workers' rights in China still have a long way to go, and that we need to be mindful of the human improvements that need to be made in China and indeed elsewhere across the country, the world. And I just thought to myself, you know, if we allow Europe to be without the UK, and if we allow the beginning of a fragmentation of Europe to develop, where perhaps the UK or France or even Germany, because for those of you who watch German politics, you would know that Alternative für Deutschland is not a very positive development in the German picture. Can we allow fascism to take hold in Europe again? Ochi or ne? Ochi. So this is what we have to do. We are fighting for the heart of Europe. Now, in Easter, I took my 14-year-old daughter to Flanders Fields to see where my great uncle is buried, 19 years old. And when my grandmother lost this brother, her mother never went inside a church again. She lost her faith overnight. And we all know what conflict does to you in here. And really, that's the real reason to remain in the European Union. It's the peace dividend, because we know that 100 years ago, these youngsters here who are here with us tonight, we've got some 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, we were burying them. And if you look at the history of Greece, Cyprus, what pain, what bloodshed. Not visited by others, but visited by Europe and bits around Europe. Can we allow ourselves to return to the pain? Because we talk a lot about jobs and investment, but we know that the biggest block to prosperity is conflict. So my message tonight is very simple. Let's not allow ourselves to lose the argument to a Mr. Farage or a Marine Le Pen or any of the other right wing, because they are in the ascendancy in Europe. Let's stand up for the values which we believe in, for the tolerance, for the workers' rights, for a better future, and for peace. Efkaristopoli.
Before I ask Sir Alan to come up and speak, I do have a statement from Sir Roger Gale, who couldn't be with us this evening, but wanted to send a statement to be read on his behalf. Firstly, I'm sorry that parliamentary business abroad prevents me from being with you today. As a supporter of Cyprus over my many years in Parliament, as the current chairman of the Cyprus All-Party Parliamentary Group, and as a citizen of Morphu, you will understand that I have a particular concern about the potential effects of a Brexit upon the Republic and its own future. In the interest of the security and the economy of the United Kingdom, I am, albeit as a Eurosceptic, voting for Britain to remain within a European Union which, for all its faults, and there are many, still in my view offers the best long-term future for us all. I also believe that it is in the best interest of Cyprus, given particularly developments in Turkey and the present regime in that country, coupled with, of course, the massive concerns over the future of migration within the Mediterranean and the wider Europe, that Britain should retain its place and its veto at the negotiating table when these issues are discussed. Britain still punches above its weight when matters of international importance are under consideration. And for us to remove ourselves from discussions at such a dangerous time, I believe, would be utter folly. We have a particular duty, given the historic links between our two countries, to protect not only our own interests, but those of Cyprus. And we can best do that by retaining our place within the European forum that is seeking to determine these issues. For that reason, if for no other, I urge you to, as in fact I have already done by post, vote overwhelmingly for Britain to remain within the European Union and then to use our strength within that union to bring about the reforms in that institution that we all know are necessary. Sir Roger Statement. I'd now like to introduce one of Cyprus's long-standing, if not the most long-standing friend, Sir Alan Meal. He has been a friend of ours since he was first elected in the 80s, serves currently as the Secretary of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Cyprus, and is a firm regular at all our community's events. Sir Alan.
First of all, can I apologise for arriving late? But Parliament is actually sitting today. Ministers are allowed time to get off, but the likes of us aren't usually. First of all, can I thank you for inviting me to come here to actually explain the arguments persisting on whether to leave the European Union or to persist with it. I'm firmly in favour of the remaining in the European Union, and I make no apologies for it. Because I just want to say at the outset that when the decision was made and the arguments were put on either side before the last general election, there was an agreement made that whoever went in, the government of the day, would actually accept that there should be a referendum. However, it was not on the basis on which the present referendum is being run. The questions are correct, but the argument isn't. Because most of the arguments that I've heard about leaving the European Union are racist and funnel against the principles I believe the British Parliament should persist with. And I say that in all honesty, because I've never heard so much rot as what's actually been portrayed in the last few weeks on the leave side. I come from a refugee background, like yourselves, although mine's farther back than yours. I come from a refugee background where my great-grandparents were captured in France and returned to England by the Duke of Norfolk because they'd stolen everything else and put it into their coffers, and the only thing left to steal was people. And they stole the people and they returned them to work on their estates in England and work as slaves. Now I know that because my name is, I'm called Meal, not because it's some heraldic thing that's been developed through history. I'm named Meal because of an idiot priest who couldn't read and write. And when the mother of a child went to have the child baptized in a village church, she was of French origin, the priest asked, "What will you call this name?" And she said, Miel. And he misspelled it and he put it in the order paper. And from that time on, everyone with my surname in the world goes back in history of that village. And the word she said, Miel, had nothing to do with meal or anything else. It was honey. They collected honey. That's what they did for a living, and that's where the element of my background comes in, and it's a foreign one, it's a refugee. On the other side of my grandparents, my grandmother was a child, and there was a knock at the door, and when they opened the door in Wexford in Ireland, There was a lot of men in red coats outside, ordering them outside of their home, which they owned, and ordering them to leave the village because they were being sent to New York. They were being sent to New York because, as far as the government were concerned, they were starving to death and needed support. They needed to be transferred to America before they died. Well, in fact, they weren't starving to death. They had cattle, they had sheep, they had potatoes. But the redcoats wanted the land. And therefore, they shipped down, they put on a ship and sent to New York. Unfortunate for them, they went to Middlesbrough. Now, you can't be more unlucky than that, setting off in New York and landing in Middlesbrough. But that's where they went. So on both sides of my family are refugees. So I understand the refugee problem, which is probably almost certainly the reason why I've been engaged for 28, 29 years in the Cyprus problem, because I understand it. It's not much different than my own. But the one thing we've got to do, if we create a Europe of the people for the people, we can't do it on a class-based system as been created in feudal times in the United Kingdom, in France and Germany and elsewhere. It has to be a new Europe, a different Europe. We're not just reintroducing feudalism, we're actually developing democracy. That's the whole purpose of it. So to listen to the arguments that's been put, which have nothing to do with creating a common Europe or maintaining it. The whole of the set of arguments which has been used from start to finish in the whole of this debate has been about migration and immigration. And they've been saying things about migrants and immigrants which is thoroughly unpleasant and disgraceful, and they should be ashamed of themselves for doing it. And that's the reality. They say things like, you know what they're like, you've heard all these arguments before. They come here, they take all the jobs, we can't see a doctor because they go all the places they use in the NHS, they work for nothing and they live the life of Raleigh and claim all the benefits in the world. Well, I don't know which migrants they use or immigrants they use that I do. Because when I go down the Dole, they're largely not migrants and they're immigrants. They're actually British people. And then they say, that's because they can't get the jobs. The immigrants have got the jobs. Actually, they've got the jobs that British people won't take. And it's no different than now than it was in the 60s, when we had full employment in Britain. Nobody worked on the buses, nobody worked in laundries, nobody worked on the farms, nobody actually got on the pit. All of these things they wouldn't do, and we had to import labour for it, particularly from West Indies and Ireland and also Africa and the Caribbean and so on and so forth. So it's all about that. And if you look at the whole question of the immigration issue in Britain, it's very, very straightforward. There are 1.7 million migrants, immigrants who are members of the European Union here, working here, living here at the present time. There are some illegals on top of that. However, they'll be dealt with, which they are. There's almost 1,000 people detained every single week and deported for various reasons, mainly through criminality, but we'll not go into that. But whilst there's 1.75 million immigrants here from the rest of the European Union, we have 2.5 million British people residing and working and living in other European member states. On top of that, we've got over 15 million other Brits who live elsewhere in the world, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and it goes on and on and on. We should be the last nation in the world to turn round and say that migration is a bad thing, because it's taken about 18, 19 million of our people who are working successfully out there. And what is very, very distasteful is that they're just using that. It's just a simple, why can't they be honest and say this is only and simply about migration? They come up with all these lines of £354 million a week we'd save, and all we put into the health service. And yet Nigel Farage was on TV the other night. He said there's £34 million a day, which is being claimed. And if you get that together and put it over a week, you put all of that money back into the health service. And actually Andrew Marr said, well, that's a little bit of a different calculation, 34 million a day for 7 days to 354 million. Where do you get in the assumption? It's make-believe stuff. It's make-it-up stuff. That's the reality of it. Because being in Europe is a good thing. And anyway, comrades, before I go on about this tirade, because I'm very angry about this, I've I believed in a strong Europe for a long time, and I've argued that it should be more democratic than it is, and I firmly believe in that. I've come here tonight actually to beg you for help. For the last 20-odd years, I've been campaigning about Europe. In fact, on Cyprus, I campaigned for decades on Cyprus, to be allowed in the European Union and to be freed from the tyranny it's under itself. And I've planned for. Now you're in. You're a full participatory member, and I ask you to do the same for us as we did for you. Back us in the cause to try and retain a united Europe. That's the reality, because it's in all of our own interest to do exactly that. And don't be brought down by the figures that they're bringing out of the woodwork. And actually, I'm not sure Nicky Morgan said this, but actually, when you look at all the facts and the figures that they're producing, they're so wrong mathematically. It couldn't be possible. We could all just be given £1 million and go home, and it wouldn't matter if he gave all the money back. The reality is somewhat different than that. But the reason I'm saying, please help us, and help us to deliver the vote, is because the consequences of coming out of the European Union are immense. They're gigantic. We will have, without any shadow of a doubt, I'm an economist of many years, and I know the facts and the figures, we will have a recession which we haven't seen the scale of since before the 1920s. I mean, it gathered momentum in the 1920s, but before then it was pretty profound. And we will have that on a scale that will be unbelievable. And there are other elements too that will occur. The value of the pound will fall. It's already falling now. Nigel Farage said 2 nights ago, what happens, so what if the pound falls a few percentage points? I'll tell you what happens if it falls a few percentage points. We lose all of our trade, we double our costs, we're not efficient, we lose all of our markets, and we lose all of our jobs. Currently in Britain, 3.5 million jobs depend on orders from the European Union. That's a fact. It's the biggest single market in the world, and everybody knows, and they quote these figures, of it being 550 million. It isn't. It's 850 million, because it's not only the European, it's the broader, greater European area, which has also got trade agreements in that. It stretches from Iceland to Kazakhstan to Russia to Finland and so on, all the way in. So we have that market of 850 million, and we are guaranteed 3.5 million jobs out of that. We also are locked into services and trade of £266 billion a year. Now everybody turns around, we can do this, we do not need the European Union, we can do it without the European Union. Nonsense. Are you telling me that the French farmers who barricade the whole of Normandy every time there's a problem over prices of grain or potatoes or anything else, are you telling me that they'll still agree that the farmers of Britain should receive their brown envelopes every month? By the way, it's very important that they get that. Very important to you. 42% of our trade on potatoes comes from Cyprus. And we're actually not growing as much potatoes as we can, because there's a common agreement on that. So it will harm Cyprus if that particular happens. But they're into a situation just making this up as they actually go along, and it will have a dramatic effect. I've seen some of the other variants that's being said at the present time on how it will affect other things. It will severely affect our health service. There's no doubt whatsoever about that, because we're locked into a number of common arrangements where in the European Union, any of you are sick, you either get free healthcare or very cut price small healthcare throughout the European community. As far as Brits are concerned, or people holding British passports, all of which are you in this room, you might have 2 passports, you have a British one, you will actually be charged for that. You will not be part of that arrangement. All of those will be cancelled. It'll have a negative effect. And while they go on and on about immigrants, I think this and you think this. 80% of our medical staff in the NHS are immigrants and migrants. They're Indians, they're Pakistanis, they're Greeks. Some of our best consultants in London at the present time and Birmingham are Greeks and Cypriots. I mean, Princess Kate, she had a child delivered, or 2 children delivered in the last couple of years or so in that. And all delivered by a Greek Cypriot. And that's the reality. We have surgeons, specialists all over our service. Most of them, 80% of the people who reside in our health service are foreign. They're nurses, not just doctors. They work in the kitchens, they're cleaners, and the rest of it. Every single position. Taking jobs in certain instances that British people won't take. I'll give you an example of it. I have 2 teaching hospitals in my area. One in Nottingham and one in Sheffield. We argue year after year after year to get as many nurses to take all the qualifications in that, to enter the trade of nursing and be qualified and enter a career right away throughout. We can't get the English people, British people to join it. We have to recruit in Manila, elsewhere in the world, and that's the reality. Without migrants, immigrants, our service cannot survive. And by the way, I'm eternally grateful for that. I mean, I don't think it'd be, we should say it in a way that in any way derides against migrants. I'm extremely grateful that they're willing to give themselves to our health service. Yes, build a career. But I'd say this to you, if anybody knows anybody who works in the health service, you will all know they don't do it, they don't decide to do it, they enter it because it's on a whim. They give themselves to it, they give their lives to it, they commit themselves to it, and many of them serve the whole of their employment life in that. So it's a different case. Now I just want to give you some of the myths that's been purported over the last few weeks. Firstly, most of our laws actually come from Brussels. Well, they don't. The House of Commons has actually estimated that when you do the whole figures for everything connected with our laws, only 13% of our total laws in Britain are actually connected with the EU. And some of that is only a passing reference to other things that happened in other departments. Now, European laws are made by bureaucrats. No, they're not. They're done by the European Parliament, the Council of Ministers, and actually the member states own parliaments themselves. It's a very good way of parliamentarians to get out of saying it wasn't our fault, it's all Brussels, which they do fairly regularly. But the truth is British or European parliaments, parliamentarians that do that, and ministers predominantly, and of course they do it through the European Council of Ministers. There's this skit about Norway. Norway enjoys all the benefits despite not being a member. That's because they pay the same money as everybody else in the EU, but they have no say whatsoever. And actually, the last 2 prime ministers and the present prime minister of Norway are begging to be a member, even although they've had 2 referendums being rejected. They're still saying Norway should actually be a member. So we then go to this one. We could trade with the world, including countries in Europe, without being a member. Yes, you can. But the prices you paid are not going to be very good at all. Because I've told you, a few percentage points, what does that matter? It matters on prices because A, the value of your pound shrinks, the value of your production cost shrinks, and also your labour costs go up. So you end up saying, we're a cheap market, we'll sell it out there, and if it's not good enough for us, you don't have the market, you lose out, hence you lose the jobs. And they come out with this other thing about, why don't we trade with people like the United States and China? Well, we actually trade at the present time with Holland more than we do the whole of China. The whole of China. And, the reality is that the market's there in size, but they've already got a market production line, which is far, far cheaper than ours themselves. In the United States, we've been trading with them for years, and actually the main thing is that they've been undercutting our produce for many, many years and dumping large-scale amounts of things on the market. You say, what are those? It used to be television, things like that. It used to be steel. There's no steel anymore because we started to produce ourselves and then we had ours pulled out for us. But it was cars. Why do you think Ford are here, still here? Why do you think Toyota's here? Why do you think Torre Textiles are here? They're not here because they love Britain. They're not here because our market, because in real terms it doesn't match up. They're here because it's a platform to trade in Europe. That's why they're here, and that's why they persist to be here. And without us being in Europe, they won't be here. It's as simple as that. Migrants are a drainer on the UK economy. That's very nice to hear, isn't it? Actually, I don't know if migrants are in any way, shape or form. I mean, I've got migrants in my constituency, and they're all employed. I mean, the last time I went down to the Dole office, there was 2 people there, foreign. One was a Greek. He's a long-term person of limited opportunity. And the other one was a person from Africa who didn't even qualify to be there. Now, but the reality is, they're not a drain. Migrant people are not idle. That's the one thing they're not. And if you need convincing that, you just have to look at what's happened to the Syrians and all the rest around the world who've made their way in most atrocious circumstances, over land and sea, and lived in the most appalling conditions. And yet, they still try to get there and try to earn a living, to send money home to look after their families. They're anything, but they're not idle, not in any circumstance at all. Now, the EU, they say, done nothing for us at all. I'll just name a few things. Equal pay for equal work, cheaper air travel, free or cheap medical care, cheap mobile phone charges, better food labelling, better health services, controls on food packaging, tough new laws on tobacco, EU action made banks safer and more accountable, British benefits from part of almost half the UK's trade and foreign investment, UK membership provides 3.5 billion jobs, lots of rights we enjoy at work come directly from the EU, laws on holiday entitlement, extended paternity leave, full and part-time workers' rights, increased health and safety. EU membership makes it quicker, easier and safer travel to cheap fares, more routes, compensation schemes, banning of roaming, charging for mobile phones, improved ticketing systems, reduced healthcare costs, consumer rights, 14-day cooling off periods for goods and services produced online, sold online, end of hidden charges, banning on certain bank fees, banning on premium rate phone numbers for customers' helplines. Young people can work, study and train across the entire EU. EU membership allows millions of Britons to benefit from free movement every year. Britain's, as I said, 2.8 million EU citizens here, while we've only got a few. Now it goes on and on and on. And I say this to you, that this list of things that were there, I could fill a book with it. The reality is that we're better together than we are apart. Yeah. And those people who go around and said to us, it's all about migration, at a time when Europe has got 8 million refugees, which actually we caused that refugees. We did certain actions in the Middle East and elsewhere which caused people to move north. We didn't set up programs to protect them and put investments in these countries so they moved on. No, we've done all of that. At the time of that, Britain has taken a decision that in the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years, will reluctantly accept 20,000 people, mainly women and children, into the shores of Britain from Syria. Now, we've done that while other countries have millions. Now, I say this, we haven't got a migration problem in this country. We've got a problem on certain migrants overseas, and the best thing we can do that is look at this professionally, and look at it as senior people should do, and sit down and say, how can we rectify this terrible situation on behalf of everybody? Most notably, those people have to suffer because they're caught up in a triangle of need. Now, I beg you, I appeal to you, those 25, 24 years ago, we were successful in driving the message through that ultimately Cyprus should become a member of the European Union. As of right. And by the way, has a veto on things like Turkey. Everybody's saying the Turkeys are going to come over the border, 70-odd million. Well, it was only about 2 months ago, it was 10 million Russians. Then it was 8 million Poles. When I have a company in my constituency, me and Dennis Skinner, called Sports Direct, and we've dragged him in there this week. We said to him, you don't pay your staff the minimum wage. You queue them for a quarter of an hour at a time and search them, body search them every single day out of the place. That is not the way to treat your workers. It is not, and then you don't even pay them for doing it. And we said that's got to stop, and it is going to stop because he's agreed to stop it. But we don't want a country that has employment laws that allow that. We don't have to have a country that treats people as though they're second-class citizens and potential thieves. We build a society of the future, a society that we need to be proud of. And society meets the need of our people, well and ill health, education, or simply the social care. We want to build a Europe fit to live in, work in, and live all of our lives in. All I ask you, comrades, that you do the right thing, think about it, and give us your support, and help us in any way you can, and all your relatives too. Don't let them stay at home. Don't stand idly by. That's the last thing. This is very important. Turn them all out as best you can, and help us win a new tomorrow.
I'd like to thank Sir Alan for his contributions. Both Sir Alan and Catherine have agreed to take questions if people have them. But before we move on to that, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of the High Commissioner, who is just about to run off. He is a strong supporter of our community and is always here at our events, does an excellent job, and has also written and spoken extensively about the benefits of a stronger UK in the European Union. So thank you. Who is one of our very own, did a great job in the European Parliament over the last term. Marina would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Christo. The reason I really feel I'd like to say a few words is because we've heard all the excellent reasons why we need to stay in as UK residents and citizens. But one of the important things is, as an MEP, a former MEP, I can tell you, a British MEP, how important it is for us to have representation for Cyprus at the table. Now, we know with the talks that are going on, there will be a stage when the EU will play a role in this.
Just back off the mic.
Oh, sorry. The EU will play a role in it, and we have to be there to put forward our view. Also, the British MEPs are there supporting the Cypriot MEPs. Very important. There's only 6 of them. There were 72 of us. Most of us were pro-Cyprus. When we had the conversation about direct trade with the occupied zone, I was there and I managed to get the government involved, the UK government, and other friendly MEPs to stop it. Had you not had representation there, at the moment they would be trading directly with the occupied zone. When we had the budget come for renewal for the missing persons, I was there as the UK representative, but it could be any British MEP who is pro-Cyprus, and we ensured that the money kept rolling in. So we are needed there. We're needed on the inside, not the outside, as people of Cypriot origin. And I just wanted to add, because that's the others have been very polite and put it forward as a UK, but it's also a Greek topic for me. Thank you.
Ολόκληρη την εκδήλωση θα την παρακολουθήσετε επίσης την Τετάρτη 22 Ιουνίου στην εκπομπή με το φακό του Hellenic TV στο κανάλι 244 στο Freeview από το Ρόκουμπο στη ΣΥΤΑ UK, αλλά και σε ολόκληρο τον κόσμο από το website μας και τα κανάλια Hellenic TV 1 και WNN.